More discussion on the tragedy at Hoërskool Driehoek in Vanderbijlpark. We're joined on the line by Terry Oakley-Smith, the Managing Director of Diversi-T. Good afternoon, Terry, and welcome to the SABC News Desk.
Thank you. Good afternoon. How are you?
Terry, are we looking at a situation emerging in Vanderbijlpark where race politics is now being used to inflict more pain on a community that's already grieving?
You know, one really hopes not. And as far as one can see, apart from the initial Facebook post by Vanderbijlpark, which was then picked up by Lindsay Marsdorp, the speaker or the commentator from BLF, this is not a racial incident. I think, first of all, one would like to offer condolences to obviously the family, but all the friends, the school community, and so on. And this really should be an opportunity for South Africans to stand together. I think it's a very poor reflection on us if at a time like this, where children are involved in such a tragedy, that we somehow look to try and make it a racist incident, which it certainly is not.
Well, the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation thinks differently, calling the remarks made by BLF racist and inhumane. What do you think?
No, I mean, I agree with the Kathrada Foundation. It would be a great pity if this was to be turned into some sort of racial incident. I think the remarks, firstly to Vanderbijlpark and then to the BLF, are definitely racist and unfortunate, to say the very least. But it's hoped that these remarks won't go further and that we can use it more as a unifying time than attempts to score racial points over the deaths of children. That would really be most unfortunate.
There have been so many incidents of racism, though, in our country of late, even when black, coloured and Indian people are often the target or victim. Now, racial tensions often flare given our painful, divisive past. How do we best diffuse such situations that could arise, like you mentioned, from inflammatory or racist remarks like these, Teresa?
You know, I think obviously it needs to start long ago. I mean, we're sort of trying to catch up now at a problem that's been around for hundreds of years. But there should be, along with the counselling in schools, there should be education as well. I think community leaders in Vereniging, obviously pastors and church people and people of different faiths, should take the lead in emphasizing that this should be a unifying thing, that all South Africans should come together. One would like to see this create opportunities for South Africans of different races to come together to pray and mourn. I think it also is really a time schools to become far more serious about educating around racism. There's nothing in the curriculum properly yet. It's not a part of what pupils have an opportunity to discuss. When such a situation occurs, people out of ignorance make these racist comments, which are really so terribly inappropriate.
Terry, how do you think we should best handle social cohesion challenges or diversity management at community level, in the workspace, or even at school level, like you're mentioning? Yes. Especially when in South Africa we're in a unique situation where we're dealing with a racially skewed economy that translates into economic inequalities for the majority of South Africans who struggle with that on a daily basis.
No, I agree with you, and it's a really difficult task. I mean, the inequality in South Africa is completely alarming and concerning, and one can understand that organizations like BLF obviously speak for many South Africans who are desperate to get land to try and reduce the inequality. But in terms of looking at issues of anti-racism and diversity, I think of work that I did with the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation a couple of years ago, bringing communities together which abut each other. So communities in Soweto and Lenasia, communities in Soweto and the white suburbs of Greenside. So essentially what one needs to do is to get South Africans talking. not necessarily totally agreeing, but prepared to listen to one another and to listen to different points of view. Obviously, schools are excellent places for this, as long as they're not confined simply to the pupils. One would want to see the teachers, the parents, the school governing body, all having opportunities to talk. And obviously, our faith-based institutions can create other opportunities. And I think the media has a major part to play. Somehow or other, the media somehow tiptoed around issues. Yes, big reports and, serious headlines and comments when racist incidents occur. But I think what is needed as well is a far more educative approach so that South Africans can begin to understand across all the colour groupings that you mentioned, what our differences are and how we can create more unity. I think social cohesion has been nothing more than a buzzword. I mean, I can't think of any areas where there's been serious work done around social cohesion. My work is mainly done in businesses. Because that's the one place where South Africans do come together. So it gives one a very good platform for discussing such issues. But ideally it should begin in communities, in schools, and in faith-based areas.
Terry, just on that note, you must do a lot of work in corporate South Africa. Are we working together as South Africans more smoothly and better than we did perhaps 15, 20 years ago at that? And what are some of the challenges around diversity and social cohesion that are still very prevalent in our workspaces?
Well, I think first of all, to answer your question, we still face many of the same issues that we faced in 1994. Very few South Africans, I think the latest study by the Institute of Justice and Reconciliation put it at about 47% of South Africans have ever actually had a person of another race in their home. So South Africans tend to live in our little by issues of race and culture and sometimes religion, and that continues to be a major problem. Diversity issues, though, do change, and race remains the burning one in South Africa. But obviously issues around gender, especially since the Me Too movement, have become increasingly talked about. And also issues of age or generation. As younger as the millennials, and now, in fact, the Generation Z's come into the workplace, their ideas and thoughts on these issues may be different from those of their parents or their bosses in the workplace. And so those also need to be taken into account in discussions around diversity.
Terry, the NDP sets 2030 as a deadline for nation building and social cohesion. And it states by then that South Africans will be more conscious of the things we have in common than our differences. Do you think we will ever reach a point where apartheid is no longer part of our living memory? And to what extent will that aid in managing diversity more successfully and in aiding social cohesion? And is it all achievable in just 11 years' time?
Well, if it was achievable, unless we see a really serious attempt. And even then, I don't think it would be even possible or even a good idea to get rid of the memories of apartheid. I mean, it's like asking Jewish people to forget about the Holocaust. I think we need to have a very clear understanding of our history in South Africa so that we can move forward. I mean, if you think about it, if you think about some of the legislation that's been passed, employment equity, the top 3 levels in companies are still consist by far of white men. So, with such a short time to go till we hope to achieve social cohesion, I think there's a huge amount of work to do. And we need to remember, it's no good saying, apartheid is in the past, let's move forward. We need to, all of us, black and white particularly, white people need to understand what apartheid did, how the pain it caused, the pain it's still causing, because, laws change, but people's lives don't necessarily change. And when one thinks about the inequality that we mentioned previously, one can see that there's a huge amount of work to do before we can really reach a sort of plateau of social cohesion.
Thank you so much, Terry. That was Terry Oakley-Smith, the MD of Diversity, joining us on the line.